Pleased to be joined now by NFL writer for Sports Illustrated, Matt Verderame, joining us on the line here. He's had some AFC East write-ups for SI.com that we wanted to kind of feel him out on a little bit. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the time here in the offseason.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
So I do want to begin with, your one move that you feel every AFC East team should make this offseason. I know you've done other divisions, but obviously we're a little AFC East myopic. So let's begin and keep it simple here and lead off with the Bills. You're of the opinion that they should let just about every one of their free agents walk. I think that will be a case to a large degree, maybe not universally so, but their cap situation makes it prohibitive to run it back, quote unquote. I know if they had their way, they'd like to have Daquan Jones back for sure, knowing all the holes they have in terms of free agents on their defensive line. But we're probably looking at a youth movement here, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of where I was going with that. Look, I think Daquan Jones, you're right. If there was one guy that they had their druthers they could re-sign, it would be him. The question is, how much do you invest in Jones when you've already invested a ton in Ed Oliver right next to him? And so it becomes hard to lock up all that money on the interior of the defensive line. But, a lot of these guys now at this point that are hitting free agency, not all of them, but a lot of them are older guys. Leonard Floyd had a very nice year for the Bills. You could probably let him walk, get the comp pick for him. One of the more interesting guys is an AJ Epinesa. Do you try to bring him back? Does it work? Is there enough playing time to go around? Obviously, they have to make a decision on Gregory Rousseau's fifth-year option this offseason as well. I just think if you're the Bills with the cap situation and looking down the line and trying to make sure you maintain flexibility, it's hard to bring back some of these guys at numbers that they might get on the market, a guy like a Gabe Davis, when in reality, you're probably better off trying to maybe find that cheaper replacement in the draft and then move forward, being able to build around Josh Allen without having to pay some of these guys on a second or third contract a lot of money.
Certainly, it's different from position to position, from wide receiver to corner to defensive line, defensive end, line, all that. But generally speaking, there does seem to be, we forget that maybe half the team, let's say half the teams in the league are over the cap. So they've got to get cap compliant first. So almost universally, no matter what free agent you lose, there's going to be a comparable guy out there that you could go out and grab if you can free up the money to do that. And really, it's about what you have to offer, the chance to get a championship, the chance to maybe sign a short-term deal, get back on the radar, go to a really good team on a really good defense, make a difference, and then hit it again, right? How big of a phenomenon is that in your opinion?
No, Steve, I don't think there's any question. And the Bills are an attractive team because they are a really good team. And if you're a defensive free agent, you're looking at it going, okay, it's a good defense coached by a defensive-minded head coach. And if you're on the offensive side of the ball, you're going, well, this is great. I get to play with Josh Allen. So there's definitely part of that. Like I mentioned earlier with Gabe Davis. Okay, now, if he walks, there are a ton of free agents out there. And you're not going to replace him with a guy who costs more. That doesn't make any financial sense. But maybe you go out and you sign a guy like a Darnell Mooney, who you say, you know what, he's going to cost a fraction of what Gabe Davis is going to cost. And with Josh Allen, he might really take off. He's been productive in the past with lesser quarterbacks. Maybe he's a guy who could go to Buffalo and have a resurgence. I think you give Shakir a bigger role in the offense. He's obviously a kid with a lot of talent and a lot of potential. But yeah, to your point, Steve, there are guys littering free agency. Look, we always see the first 72 hours or so of free agency, and we see these massive contracts for these top line guys. The real value in free agency is in the weeks after that, where you find that second tier guy, that guy who, for whatever the reason, whether it be a little bit of an injury history, whether it be age, who you know what, get this guy in a 1-year deal. Leonard Floyd's a perfect example. He was signed far later on, had a really good year for the Bills, and now they're in position to get a comp pick for him. So I think it's guys like that who you can bring in where you're not paying a premium, and yet you're not really having a drop-off.
Do you think, Matt, that because we were looking at some of the positions in free agency already, safety was an example of this last year. You had people like Jordan Poyer who thought they were going to get paid giant money in free agency last year, and the problem is there were 17 other starting safeties entering the free agent market, and the only guy that got paid was Jesse Bates, and everybody else took a haircut. in free agency. We're looking at those lists already. They're long. And now you hear about potential cap casualties out there like a Joey Bosa or a Nick Chubb, who granted is coming off injury and probably won't command big money. But there are enough examples out there where you're sitting there going, holy cow, like supply is going to far outweigh demand. And you got 16 teams trying to just get cap compliant. They're not going to be shelling out giant money to do that all over again. So my question to you is, to your point about Leonard Floyd, you saw the Bills take advantage of late free agency. I feel like because of the flood of supply that we're going to get here in the coming weeks, there's going to be a handful of teams that are going to be able to take advantage of that kind of scenario come May or June post-draft. Forget about second wave of free agency.
There's no doubt. And we see this some years. Look, and this draft is expected to be very deep. Like if you talk to people around the league, a lot of people feel like this is one of the deeper drafts in recent memory. So that also plays a factor in this. If you're a general manager, we'll stick at wide receiver for a second. Would you rather pay a receiver $25 million or go draft a guy in the top 50 where you're saying, hey, we're going to get this guy cheap for 4 years. If you draft in the first round, you're going to get him cheap for 5 years if he works out for you. So there's definitely that aspect as well. And like this year, you guys mentioned Daquan Jones. Daquan Jones is a really good player. And you know what? He might be coming a lot cheaper than people expect, because when you look at this year's class, Chris Jones, if the Chiefs don't retain him either on a tag or on a long-term deal before free agency, he is the top free agent, you could argue, on the market. Then there are guys like Christian Wilkins. I mean, Christian Wilkins is a big name, is a big-time player, and there's, beyond those two, a lot of depth at D tackle. Like, somebody's going to end up sitting there holding the bag saying, man, I thought I was going to get $20 million a year. I'm going to get 10, and I'm going to do it on a one-year deal. I mean, that's reality in today's NFL. If you don't get that deal quickly, that money dries up in a hurry. I remember last year, Orlando Brown coming out of Kansas City. A lot of people thought he was going to get massive, massive money. He ended up getting decent money in Cincinnati, but nowhere near what he was expected to get because other tackles signed first. Mike McGlinchey signed early, Jawan Taylor signed early, and that was it. So there's always that risk if you're a free agent. If you don't sign quickly as one of the bigger name guys, especially if your position is stacked, it becomes hard to find that money. All of a sudden, teams don't have it. Even if they value you, they can't give you that money. They just don't have it in their coffers. And so it's definitely a factor. And that's why I think a lot of the smarter teams, they wait. They let those teams with huge cap space cachets, they let them spend it. And then they slide in and they get the value.
Further down in your article for SI, you also mentioned, you went down through the AFC East. Now, it was really interesting. And you're kind of where Brownie and I live. The Miami Dolphins have kind of backed themselves into a corner with Tua. Certainly, he's played well. His numbers back it up. They were in the hunt for the division title all the way to Week 18. He's seems a little fragile, although he took about every snap this year you wanted him to take for Miami. I mean, he lived through it this year. But still, there's that doubt about whether he can carry a franchise like an elite quarterback can. But now it's time to put up. And your kind of advice is, hey, you may as well pay him and see what happens, right?
It's hard. I would not want to have to pay him right now, but I don't think they have much of a choice. Right. They don't have it. They are so capped out. I mean, they're if you look at just the cap sheet, they're in a familiar or a similar spot, I should say, with Buffalo. But the Bills have a lot more levers they can pull here. And the Bills know that they have the quarterback. They know they have the guy. There was no hesitancy. Like Josh Allen, you're happy to pay Josh Allen. I don't know that you're over the moon to pay Tua here, even beyond just the health stuff. We all saw that Week 18 game. And in that game, at no point did you ever feel like Tua was going to make the big plays down the stretch to win that game. None. And Allen, for the mistakes he made in that game, he also made all the plays you need to make down the stretch to win it. And so I think if you're the Dolphins, I think you're trying to pay Tua to get that cap number down in the future so you can help with your situation financially. But I don't want to give him huge guaranteed money. Like, I want outs in that contract. I want that thing to have incentives in it. The problem is if you're Tua's representation, you're sitting there going, no, not going to do you any favors. Like, we want $5 and $250 minimum because that's what the going rate is. And as the cap keeps jumping, it's only going to go higher and higher and higher. I mean, I think if right now he signed today, he's probably looking at 55 a year, which is crazy. Like, he is not shown to be that level of player. I do quarterback rankings every week for Sports Illustrated during the year. He's above average, but he's more in that 10 to 15 range. He's not really in that top 10 range. And so that's a lot of money to give to a guy who A, has injury concerns, and B, yes, put up numbers this year, but against the best teams, really struggled, did not play well. Whether it was Buffalo, Kansas City, Philadelphia, so on and so forth, did not perform the way you'd want him to. So, yeah, I think you give him the money because that's the NFL that we live in today, but you do it really wincing and hoping it works for the best.
Yeah, because the Dolphins can reduce his cap number and make themselves more cap flexible with an extension as opposed to the franchise tag. That's number one for them. But, yeah, I mean, if you're Tua and his camp, this is your last shot at it for giant money, at least as far as I see it, because that guy's 1 or 2 concussions away from maybe hanging it up. I mean, he contemplated retirement long and hard last offseason, sat down with his family and everything. So I got to believe his agent feels this might be the only time we can get to swing big on a contract. So, I mean, unless the Dolphins are ready to pony up, I could see that shaping up to be a little bit of a staring contest between the two sides.
It could be. It absolutely could be. And when you look at his draft class, Herbert's now gotten paid and Burrow got paid. And it's a weird thing because, look, Burrow is the better player and he's got the credentials, right? I mean, he's won the division titles. He's been to the Super Bowl. Herbert has no credentials from a team perspective. None. But I don't think anybody believes that Herbert's not the player that Tua is. I think everybody thinks Herbert is a more talented player. The other question you have, if you're Tua's representation, but also on the flip side, if you're the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill is still, if not the best receiver in football, top 3 for sure. What happens when Tyreek Hill isn't that guy anymore? I mean, we're getting to a point now where he's going to be on the other side of 30. Like, what happens with that? And also, are they going to pay Waddle a fortune? I would think that they probably do when that time comes. But what is Tua in 3 years from now when Tyreek is not the Tyreek that we know at this moment? And maybe Waddle's gone, or if he's still there, now he's the number 1 guy and he's not the number 2 guy. Like, that is the question. I don't think, like, when you look at a Josh Allen, you don't worry about that. You don't worry about what he's going to be. As long as he's healthy and he's upright, he's going to be great. You do worry about that with Tua. I think it's the same question we're going to have about Purdy in a few years in San Francisco. What happens if Brandon Ayuk's not there? What happens if George Kittle's on the back end at that point? Then what? Are you still going to pay him $55 million a year? You still feel good about that? That's a real question. So I think you're right. Like, the Dolphins are going to have trepidation. I just think, as Steve said, they're backed into a corner. I don't know where they're going to go with this whole thing. And if you're Tua in his camp, you're looking at it going, that sounds good to me. Pay me. Pay me right now. I'll take the check.
So as we move on through the East, you go to the New England Patriots. For a franchise that for so long seemed granite rock solid. I mean, nothing changed over there. They changed this guy, that guy. Everything was just chugging along, and it never moved. Now it seems like they put the whole thing in a blender. You know what it's going to look like, right? I mean, they've got new coach, new staff, nothing but question marks at key positions, a bunch of free agents taken off. Matt Slater even just retired today. So, how do you see them shaking out and sifting through all the issues that are facing the Patriots?
I think it's a full-on rebuild right now, right? I mean, Belichick leaves, and so it's Gerard Mayo coming in, and let's be honest about where they are. They don't have a quarterback. Now, maybe they draft one at 3. Maybe they get a Drake May or Jaden Daniels, however it works out. But they don't have a quarterback. If they want to go the veteran route, they want to get a bridge guy, fine. No matter how you slice it, they're not ready to compete right now. That offense does not have enough talent. Ramondre Stevenson is a very nice running back. They don't have a number 1 receiver. They don't have anybody on that offense that scares you. Defensively, they've got talent, especially with Christian Gonzalez coming back, Judon coming back off the injuries. Defensively, they can be good. But offensively, that is a full rebuild. And so, look, they have had 20 years now of incredible success. If you're in Foxborough, you're going to have to live with a few years of kind of retooling this thing, figuring it out. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Look, you've got to reset sometimes. And New England was trying to piecemeal it together with Belichick there. They were hoping that Mac Jones was going to be the answer, and then they could have kind of relaunched on the fly. It didn't happen. He's not that guy. And so I think if you're New England, at this juncture, you've got a lot of cap space. Go out and get yourself some weapons on offense. Go get guys, though, who are going to be there for a while, not these cheap 1-2 year rentals. And then, in my opinion, if you believe in a quarterback at 3, draft him. If you don't, then don't force it. Don't take a guy just to take a guy. Go get a Bridge. Go get a Ryan Tannehill. Go get someone of that ilk, and move forward and kind of wait it out a year. If you're Mayo, you know you have a little bit of time. The Crafts, it's a good organization. They're not going to rush things. But yeah, I think it's a hard case to be made that the Pats are in a clear 4th in the AFC East right now.
And then finally with the Jets, it's becoming more and more readily apparent that they grossly miscalculated in the draft by not investing in their offensive line. I know Pittsburgh kind of beat them to the punch on Broderick Jones in round 1 last year, but they didn't pivot, and they went D-line again where they had an embarrassment of riches, and the chickens came home to roost in week 1. Poor pass protection led to, Rodgers' season-ending injury just 4 plays into the season. Even if he doesn't get injured in week 1, you have to believe with the way that line played out, there's no way Rodgers would not have missed time with the pressure he likely would have been under on a weekly basis. All that being said, the question now is, do the Jets have their head on straight to actually fix an offensive line that doesn't need just one fix, but probably multiple fixes, not to mention the fact that maybe their best lineman is coming off a major, major injury for the second time in his career?
Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but the Jets have given no reason to believe that they can figure this out. 0. I mean, I am from New York. I am from the area. I watched. I'm 35. I'm intimately familiar with the Jets and how they operate. The Jets have done very little in my entire lifetime to make me think that the Jets are going to all of a sudden figure this thing out and everything's going to work and they're going to be singing Kumbaya come week 15 next year. My problem with the Jets now is the same problem I had with the Jets when they were acquiring Aaron Rodgers last year. Aaron Rodgers is an obvious, when he's healthy, an obvious upgrade, a massive upgrade over anybody that they've had in quite some time. The problem is they can't block anybody. And that was obvious last offseason. And yet, as you point out, they did not do enough. Yeah, you draft Carter Warren and you draft Tippmann in the second round. That's all fine and well. But they did not nearly do enough to address the myriad issues they were going to have up front. And so now you're sitting here and they're tight to the cap. Now, you can always create space. We all know this with extensions and restructures, and you cut a few guys, and that's fine. This is not a great class of offensive line help in free agency. It's Tyron Smith, who's an older left tackle who's often injured. Kevin Zeitler is a really good guard. Maybe he gets out of Baltimore. If he does, that's a guy you can look at. Dotson coming out of the Rams, had a really nice year there. If he gets out of LA, okay. Their tackles, they're going to have to draft a tackle in the first round. I don't see any way around it. There's not enough in free agency to help them there. I still think it's an issue. And then on top of that, you got a 41-year-old quarterback next year coming off a torn Achilles. And who's he throwing to? Garrett Wilson's great. Who else? Who else is there? I think the Jets can fill a need. I don't think they can fill 4 needs, 5 needs. And in the AFC, that's what they're going to have to do to compete. Could they make a run at a wild card spot if everything goes well? Sure. Do I think they're going to? No, I don't.
Last one from me, Matt. You had another article in SI that was really interesting about the confidence, and certainly the AFC is stacked with quarterbacks at the top of with Pat, Josh, Lamar, Justin, Joe, the whole crew. And you went down the list, and surprisingly, I think at this point, 12 months ago, we wouldn't have known this, but C.J. Stroud is up at the top of that list as well. They just got better. Joe Burrow going to come back seemingly healthy this coming year. So they're going to be stacked once again. But the confidence level, how much in these teams, like, of course, the Bills are confident going in, the Chiefs are confident going in, and now the Texans have reason to believe they're going to be confident. Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh, a lot of optimism there. How much of the confidence in each of these quarterbacks around the AFC that we're all so familiar with centers around stuff other than the guy, the team around it? How much of the, what I mean? Because I know it's different from team to team as well.
Yeah, and look, I think when you're talking about this many great quarterbacks in the conference, I mean, Steve, when you were playing, you had Jim Kelly, there was Warren Moon and Dan Marino and John Elway and so on. I mean, Joe Montana for a few years and so on down the line. Like, you guys kept everybody else from making the Super Bowl those years. I mean, well, what was the reason? Well, the team around Jim was great and Jim was great. So it worked out okay. The reality is, like, you look at Justin Herbert with the Chargers. He's always going to have an uphill battle because he's got Patrick Mahomes in his division. Like, you're going to have to find a way to get past that guy, and not just him, but Andy Reid and Brett Veach, right? And now all of a sudden, we all looked at Trevor Lawrence a year ago and went, man, the Jaguars are really on the come. This is a young and up-and-coming team. And now you look at it and go, they're going to have a problem. Because Houston's really good and really young, and they nailed the draft even beyond Stroud. Guys like Tank Dell and Will Anderson Jr. And so you look at it and go, man, that's going to be a problem, right? And then you have the North where, is it Lamar? Is it Joe Burrow? They're kind of ping-ponging off each other. So I think so much of it does go into, well, who's around you? Who's making the decisions in the front office? Who's got the better coach? Who's got the better line play? We spend so much time looking at all the fantasy football positions. Who wins up front? Who can help that quarterback the most? And who's got a defense that's going to keep that quarterback from having to score 30 points every week? So, yeah, I think a ton of it is based on the decision makers around the organization, the coaching staff putting guys in the best place to succeed, and then finding a way to build that roster around those guys so it's not always incumbent on them, where you can lean a little bit. We just saw Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Yeah, Mahomes was terrific. They won the Super Bowl because of that defense, and that's why they won the Super Bowl. And then Mahomes made a half dozen plays a game. That is, to me, so much of it in a loaded AFC.
And then quickly, Matt, before we let you go, your Super Bowl 59 matchup of choice. Obviously, we like the sounds of it. I think we know why you picked it. Two teams that have never won the Super Bowl. Maybe just hand us your logic in seeing it at least as feasible, too.
Yeah, my editor over at Sports Illustrated asked me to come up with Super Bowl 59, like the matchup that everybody would want to see. And so my first rule was the Chiefs can't be involved, because I think at this point, unless you're in Kansas City, I don't think the nation is clamoring for the Chiefs back in the Super Bowl. They've become this year as Patriots. Look, the Bills are an incredibly likable team. Well, whether you're talking about character or whether you're talking about just watching them play. I mean, Josh Allen is one of one. He is so unique in the way that he plays. And look, I went to school a few hours from Buffalo, up in Oswego, New York, and I have so many friends who are Bills fans who are dying with that team every week. And when I went to school, it was with teams that were not anywhere near as talented as the team that's there right now. And so you get to know that fan base. That is such a loyal, passionate fan base in Bills Mafia. I think people in America would appreciate that team being there, A, because of the team itself and the style they play, B, the passion that comes along with them. And then on the other side, I put in the Lions. The Lions obviously getting into the NFC title game for the first time since 1991. And you look at a talented team, a very young team. I thought had maybe the best draft class of anybody this year. Dan Campbell, a very good young coach. I think the Lions, when you look at it in the NFC, not the plethora of quarterbacks that we just ran down in the AFC. So Jared Goff may be overwhelmed in the AFC to some degree. In the NFC, you can make an argument he's top 3 quarterback. I think there's a real chance the Bills and the Lions find their way to the top next year. I know the Bills have some changes to make. That's fine. You have Josh Allen. You have plenty of talent around them. I think that would be a stellar Super Bowl matchup, and one that I think the country would really enjoy watching.
Matt, good stuff. I appreciate your time. Thanks for stopping by.
Anytime, guys. Thanks a lot.